A 92-year-old woman left her apartment to a homeless man. When she entered, she cried non-stop. In the heart of Madrid, where the bustle of the big city intertwines with the nostalgia of centuries-old neighborhoods, lived Sofia Mendoza, a 92-year-old woman whose life was about to take an unexpected turn. Her small apartment on Fuencarral Street, witness to decades of love, laughter, and tears, had become her refuge since the death of her beloved husband, Anthony, 5 years ago. Sofia, with her silver hair tied back in an impeccable bun and her blue eyes still shining with the intensity of her youth, clung to her independence with the tenacity that had characterized her all her life. Every morning, she would get up at dawn, prepare her café con leche and sit by the window to watch the neighborhood wake up. She would see young people rushing to the subway, mothers taking their children to school, and shopkeepers raising the shutters of their stores. It was their ritual, their connection to the outside world. However, loneliness was beginning to weigh on her shoulders like an invisible burden. Her children, Carmen and Michael, visited her regularly, but their hectic lives and their own families prevented them from being with her as much as they would like. Sofia understood that, but it didn't make the afternoons any less long or the evenings any less quiet. It was on one of those lonely afternoons that Sofia met Peter. She was returning from grocery shopping, struggling to carry the bags despite her cane, when a middle-aged man approached to help her. "Allow me, ma'am," Peter said with a gentle smile, taking the bags from her trembling hands. Sofia looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. Peter, with his unkempt beard and shabby clothes, did not fit the image of the typical neighborhood neighbor. Yet there was something in his brown eyes, a warmth and honesty, that made Sofia let her guard down. "Thank you very much, young man," Sofia replied, allowing Peter to walk her to the door of her building. That chance encounter marked the beginning of an unlikely but profound friendship. Peter, a 52-year-old man living on the streets of Madrid, began visiting Sofia regularly. At first, they were only brief encounters at the door of the building, but over time, Sofia began to invite him for coffee at her home. To Sofia's surprise, Peter turned out to be a fascinating conversationalist. He had lived 1,000 lives in one. He had been a sailor, a cook in a fancy restaurant, even worked as an assistant in an art gallery before a series of setbacks left him homeless. His stories transported Sofia to faraway places and exciting adventures, filling her life with color and excitement. In return, Sofia shared with Peter the stories of her youth, how she had met Anthony during the post-war period, her years working as a teacher in a small town in Castilla, and how they had saved penny by penny to buy the apartment she now lived in. Peter listened attentively, fascinated by the strength and determination of this woman who had survived difficult times without losing her sweetness. Meanwhile, Carmen and Michael watched this new friendship with a mixture of concern and skepticism. They could not understand how their mother, always so prudent, had opened the doors of her home to a stranger, let alone someone in Peter's situation. "Mom, are you sure it's a good idea to let that man into the house?" asked Carmen during one of her visits. "We don't know anything about him. He could be dangerous." Sofia looked at her daughter with a mixture of tenderness and firmness. "Carmen, honey, I've lived long enough to know a good person when I see one. Peter may not have much in material terms, but he has a heart of gold." Michael, more pragmatic than his sister, decided to investigate on his own. He hired a private detective to look into Peter's past. To his surprise, the report confirmed much of what Peter had told: his past as a sailor, his work at the art gallery. He even found old co-workers who spoke well of him. However, this did not completely dispel his suspicions. As the months passed, Sofia's health began to deteriorate. The stairs became more and more challenging, and maintaining the house became an exhausting task. Carmen and Michael, concerned, began to talk about the possibility of their mother moving into a nursing home. "It would be the best thing for you, Mom," Carmen insisted. "You'd have 24-hour medical care and be surrounded by people your own age." Sofia resisted the idea. The apartment was not only her home, it was the repository of her memories, the place where she had raised her children and where she had spent the last years with Anthony. Every corner held a story. Every piece of furniture bore witness to a full life. It was Peter who, surprisingly, helped her consider the idea. "Sofia, he told her one day over coffee. You deserve to rest. You've worked all your life. You've taken care of your family. Now it's time for you to be taken care of. Peter's words struck a chord with Sophia. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was time to allow herself to be cared for. However, the thought of leaving her home was heartbreaking. It was then that an idea began to form in her mind, an idea that would change the course of their lives forever. One afternoon, as Peter helped her water the plants on the balcony, Sophia made a decision. "Peter," she said in a soft but firm voice, "I want you to know that you are like the son I never had. You have brought light into my days when I needed it most." Peter, moved, did not know how to respond. Sophia continued, "I've been thinking. When I'm gone, I want this apartment to be yours." Sophia's words fell like a bombshell in the quiet Madrid afternoon. Peter, stunned, tried to protest, but Sophia interrupted him with a gesture of her wrinkled hand. "Don't say anything now, just promise me you'll think about it. This place deserves to be a home, not just an asset to sell, and you deserve a fresh start." As the sun set over Madrid, tinting the sky orange and pink, Sophia and Peter stood silently, contemplating the horizon. Neither of them could imagine the consequences this decision would have, nor the challenges they would face in the months to come. The fate of the small apartment on Fuencarral Street was about to become the center of a family storm that would shake the foundations of their lives. The news of Sophia's decision to move to a nursing home hit the Mendoza family like a bolt of lightning. Carmen and Michael, although relieved by their mother's decision, could not help but feel a pang of guilt. Were they doing the right thing? Was there no other alternative? The nursing home selection process became a family odyssey. They visited dozens of places, comparing facilities, services, and staff. Sophia looked at everything with a mixture of resignation and curiosity, as if she were choosing a hotel for a forced vacation. Finally, they found a place that seemed perfect, the Jardines del Retiro residence, an elegant building overlooking Madrid's famous park. The rooms were spacious, the staff seemed friendly and attentive, and there was a wide variety of activities for the residents. "What do you think, Mom?" asked Michael hopefully. Sophia looked out the window of what would be her new room. She could see the treetops of the Retiro gently swaying in the breeze. "I guess I could get used to it," she replied with a bittersweet smile. While Carmen and Michael busied themselves with paperwork, Sophia faced the painful task of deciding what she would take with her to her new life and what she would leave behind. Every object in her apartment held a story, a memory, the old wall clock that Anthony had given her on their first anniversary, the photographs of her children growing up, the books she had collected over the years. How to choose among so many treasures? Peter offered to help her with the move. Together they spent days going through closets, boxes, and drawers. For Peter, each object Sophia showed him was a window into her past, one more piece of the puzzle that was this extraordinary woman's life. It was during one of these days of organization that Sophia made a decision that would change the course of events. As Peter was helping her empty an old trunk, Sophia suddenly stopped, as if she had remembered something important. "Peter, I need you to do me a favor," she said, in a low, almost conspiratorial voice. "In the bedroom behind the closet there's a safe. The combination is the date of my wedding to Anthony. Inside is something I want you to keep for me." Intrigued, Peter followed Sophia's instructions. Behind the heavy oak cabinet, sure enough, he found a small safe built into the wall. With trembling hands, he dialed the combination Sophia had provided. The door opened with a soft click. What Peter found inside took his breath away. Bundles and bundles of bills carefully wrapped in tissue paper. A fortune in cash hidden for who knows how long. "Sophia," Peter began, not knowing what to say. "It's the savings of a lifetime," Sophia explained calmly. "Anthony and I always distrusted banks. We lived through hard times, you know. We saved every peseta we could, and then every euro. We never used it. It was our safety net." Peter stared at the money, unable to process what he was seeing. "But why are you showing it to me?" he finally asked. Sophia took Peter's hands between hers. "Because I trust you, Peter. I want you to keep it. Don't tell anyone, not even my children. Someday you will need it, and when that day comes, use it wisely." Peter's head was spinning. How could Sophia trust him with something like that? And what if her children found out? Yet Sophia's gaze was steady, and resolute. There was no doubt in her eyes. "I promise you, Sophia," Peter finally said, "I'll keep it and use it however you want." That night, while Sophia slept, Peter hid the money in a safe place sworn to secrecy. Little did he know that this promise would put him at the center of a family conflict that was about to erupt. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Carmen and Michael took turns helping their mother with the final preparations. Sophia, for her part, seemed to have accepted her fate with a serenity that surprised everyone. Moving day came sooner than anyone expected. A small moving truck was waiting in front of the building to take Sophia's belongings to her new residence. Carmen and Michael supervised that everything was loaded correctly, while Sophia took one last walk around the apartment, silently saying goodbye to every corner. Peter arrived just as Sophia was about to leave. He brought with him a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked in the park. "To brighten up your new room," he said, handing it to Sophia with a shy smile. Sophia took the flowers, deeply moved. It was at that moment that she decided to share with Peter her last wish. "Peter," she said quietly, making sure her children could not hear her, "I want you to know that this apartment is yours. I have decided. You deserve a home, and I can't think of anyone better to take care of this place." Peter felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "Sophia, I can't accept something like this. It's too much." "It's not an offer, it's a decision," Sophia replied firmly. "Promise me you'll fight for it no matter what." Before Peter could respond, Carmen came over to announce that everything was ready. It was time to leave. Sophia looked at Peter one last time, her eyes conveying all that words could not express. Then, with a firm step despite her cane, she left the apartment that had been her home for decades. As the car drove away, carrying Sophia toward her new life, Peter stood on the sidewalk, holding the key to the apartment that Sophia had discreetly slipped into his hand. Little did he know that this key would be the beginning of a battle that would test his loyalty, his integrity, and his determination. At the Jardines del Retiro residence, Sophia was slowly adapting to her new routine. The first few nights were difficult, the silence of her room very different from the familiar sound of traffic on Fuencarral Street. Gradually, however, she began to find comfort in the little things. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee in the mornings, chats with other residents during bingo sessions, and daily visits to the garden where she could feel the sun on her face. Carmen and Michael visited her frequently, bringing news from the outside world and making sure she was comfortable. Sophia appreciated their efforts, but she couldn't help but feel that something was missing. She missed her conversations with Peter, his frank laughter and his unique way of looking at the world. Meanwhile, in the apartment on Fuencarral Street, a storm was brewing. Carmen and Michael, determined to put their mother's affairs in order, began to catalogue the remaining possessions in the apartment with the intention of selling it. For them, it was the logical decision. The empty apartment would only generate expenses, and the money from the sale could be used to ensure that their mother had the best possible care in the nursing home. It was during one of these visits to the apartment that they met Peter. The man was sitting on the sofa in the living room, as if he owned the place. "What are you doing here?" asked Michael, surprised and annoyed. "How did you get in?" Peter calmly showed the key Sophia had given him. "Sophia asked me to take care of the apartment," he explained. "She gave me a key and told me I could stay here." Carmen and Michael exchanged looks of disbelief. Had their mother given a key to her home to this man? And had she told him he could stay? It was inconceivable. "Look, Peter," Carmen said, trying to remain calm. "We appreciate that you've been friends with our mother, but she's in residence now. We're going to sell this apartment. You'll have to leave." Peter stood up, his expression a mixture of determination and sadness. "I'm sorry, but I can't do that. Sophia asked me to stay here. She told me the floor was mine." Peter's words fell like a bombshell in the room. Carmen and Michael were stunned, unable to process what they had just heard. "That's impossible," Michael blurted out, his voice trembling with rage. "Our mother would never do something like that. You're lying." Peter remained calm, despite the rising hostility. "I understand this is hard to believe, but it's the truth. Sophia told me the day she moved into the residence. She asked me to take care of this place, to make it my home." Carmen, always the more pragmatic of the two siblings, tried to reason. "Peter, even if our mother told you that, legally this floor belongs to us. We are her heirs. I know that, Peter replied mildly, but I also know what Sophia wanted, and I think we should respect her wishes. The tension in the room was palpable. Michael, furious, threatened to call the police if Peter didn't leave immediately. Carmen, though equally annoyed, tried to remain calm and seek a peaceful solution. "We'll do this," she finally said. "We'll go talk to our mother. If she confirms what you say, we'll discuss it. But until then, you can't stay here." Peter nodded, knowing he had no choice. He gathered the few belongings he had brought with him and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned to Carmen and Michael. "I know this is hard for you guys," he said. "But Sophia became the family I never had. I just want to honor her wishes." With those words, Peter walked out of the apartment, leaving Carmen and Michael in a state of shock and confusion. How could they face their mother with this? And what if it turned out to be true? Back at the residence, Sophia could tell something was wrong. Her children seemed tense during her visits, exchanging meaningful glances and avoiding certain topics of conversation. It was during a sunny afternoon, while they were having tea in the residence's garden, that the bombshell finally exploded. "Mom," Carmen began, her voice strained, "we need to talk about the apartment." Sophia looked up from her teacup, her expression serene. "What about the floor, honey?" Michael, unable to contain his frustration, interjected. "Is it true that you told Peter he could stay there, that the apartment was his?" The silence that followed that question seemed to last an eternity. Sophia looked at her children, seeing the confusion and pain in their eyes. She knew this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. "Yes," she finally answered. "That's right." Carmen's teacup shook in her hand, spilling a few drops on the white tablecloth. Michael stood up, unable to remain seated. "How could you do something like that?" he exclaimed. "That floor is our family home. How could you give it away to a stranger?" Sophia remained calm, despite the emotional storm raging around her. "Peter is not a stranger," she said firmly. "He's been my friend and my support for the past 5 years. He has given me companionship when I needed it most. But we are your family," protested Carmen, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't we mean anything to you?" Sophia's heart shrank at the pain in her daughter's voice. "Of course you do, sweetheart. You guys mean everything to me. But you have your own lives, your own families. Peter has no one." Michael, still standing, shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe you're doing this. Do you have any idea how much that apartment is worth? What we could do with that money?" Sophia looked at her son sadly. "The value of a home is not measured in money, Michael. It's measured in the memories it holds, in the love it has harbored. And I want Peter to have the opportunity to create his own memories there." Silence fell across the table again. Carmen and Michael looked at each other, not knowing how to process what they were hearing. Their mother, always so practical and sensible, how could she make such a decision? "Mom," Carmen finally said, her voice cracking with emotion, "please reconsider. That apartment, it's all we have left of Dad's. You can't just give it away." Sophia took her daughter's hands in hers. "Honey, your father's memories are not on the walls of that floor. They're here," she said, pointing to her heart. "And here," she added, gently touching Carmen's forehead. "Nothing can take that away from us." Michael, still unable to accept the situation, turned and walked away, needing space to process his emotions. Carmen stood beside her mother, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Sophia knew that this conversation was just the beginning. She had opened a Pandora's box, and the consequences of her decision were just beginning to manifest themselves. As she watched Michael pacing furiously in the garden and felt Carmen's trembling hands between hers, Sophia wondered if she had done the right thing. But in her heart, she knew that Peter deserved this chance, this new beginning. What Sophia couldn't imagine was how this decision would trigger a series of events that would test family ties, reveal long-kept secrets, and forever change the lives of everyone involved. The storm was just beginning, and no one was prepared for what was to follow. The days following the confrontation at the residence were tense and emotionally charged. Carmen and Michael, still reeling from his mother's revelation, immersed themselves in a frantic search for legal options. They consulted lawyers, reviewed old documents, and argued endlessly about how to proceed. Peter, for his part, found himself in an awkward position. He deeply respected Sophia and wanted to honor her wishes, but he also understood Carmen and Michael's pain and confusion. He decided to stay away from the apartment for the time being, sleeping in shelters and park benches, as he had done for years before he met Sophia. Meanwhile, back at the residence, Sophia was wrestling with her own demons. Her children's reaction had affected her more than she wanted to admit. Had she been selfish in making this decision without consulting them? Was she betraying Anthony's memory by giving away the home they had built together? It was during one of these sleepless, reflective nights that Sophia made a decision. She needed to talk to someone who could understand her motivations without judging her. She needed to talk to Peter. The next morning, Sophia asked one of the nurses to help her make a phone call. When Peter heard Sophia's voice on the other end of the line, he felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Peter," Sophia said, her voice tired but determined, "I need you to come see me. There's something important I need to tell you." Peter didn't hesitate for a second. Later that afternoon, he showed up at the residence, nervous but anxious to see Sophia. When he entered her room, he was surprised to see how frail she looked. The argument with her children seemed to have aged her years in a matter of days. "Sophia," Peter said softly, approaching her armchair, "how are you?" Sophia smiled at him, a tired but genuine smile. "Oh, Peter, you've come. Sit down, please. We have a lot to talk about." Peter took a seat across from her, waiting patiently as Sophia seemed to gather her thoughts. "Peter," she finally began, "I want you to know why I made the decision to leave the apartment to you." She paused, her eyes losing themselves in distant memories. "Many years ago, when Anthony and I were young, we went through some very difficult times. There was a time when we had nothing, not even a roof over our heads." Peter listened intently, beginning to understand where this story was headed. "One day," Sophia continued, "an old woman saw us on the street. Without asking, without judgment, she offered us a place to stay. It was a small room in her house, but for us it was a palace. That woman, without knowing it, changed the course of our lives." Tears began to form in Sophia's eyes as she continued. "We promised that if we ever had the chance, we would do the same for someone else. And when I met you, Peter, I knew you were that person." Peter felt a lump in his throat. Sophia's generosity, her ability to see beyond appearances, overwhelmed him. "But there's something else," Sophia said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Something even my children don't know." Peter leaned forward, intrigued. "The money you found in the safe," Sophia continued, "is not just savings. It's the result of years of careful investments that Anthony and I made. We were always wary of banks, so we kept it at home. But it's much more than my children imagine." Peter felt short of breath. How much money was really in that box? "I want you to use that money, Peter," Sophia said firmly. "Not just for yourself, but to help others, to create opportunities for those like you who need a fresh start." Peter shook his head, overwhelmed with responsibility. "Sophia, I can't accept this. It's too much. Your children—" "My children have their own lives, their own resources," Sophia interrupted. "This is something Anthony and I always wanted to do, and I trust you to see it through." Silence fell over the room as Peter processed everything he had just heard. The trust Sophia placed in him was immense, almost unbearable. "There's one more thing," Sophia said, pulling an envelope out from under her pillow. "Here's everything spelled out. My will, my wishes, the history of the money. I want you to keep it, and only open it if absolutely necessary." Peter took the envelope with trembling hands. "Sophia, Don't say anything now," Sophia said with a tired smile. "Just promise me that you will do the right thing, that you will honor our friendship and Anthony's memory." Peter nodded, unable to form words. He took Sophia's hand between his own, a silent gesture of promise and gratitude. Meanwhile, outside the residence, Carmen and Michael arrived for their daily visit. They had not expected to find Peter there, and the sight of the man leaving his mother's room reignited their anger and frustration. "What are you doing here?" demanded Michael, his voice rising. Peter, still reeling from his conversation with Sophia, tried to remain calm. "Sophia asked me to come. We needed to talk." Carmen, noticing the envelope in Peter's hands, felt her heart racing. "What's that? What did our mother give you?" Peter hesitated, aware that anything he said could make the situation worse. It's something private between Sophia and me. I'm sorry, but I can't tell you more." The tension in the hallway was palpable. Michael took a threatening step toward Peter. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm warning you that you won't get away with this. That floor is ours, and we won't let a freeloader like you take it from our mother." Peter felt anger growing inside him, but he struggled to keep his composure. "I am not a freeloader," he said in a firm voice. "Sophia is my friend, and I just want to respect her wishes." Before the situation could escalate any further, a nurse approached, drawn by the raised voices. "Please, gentlemen, this is a residence. If you cannot remain calm, I will have to ask you to leave." Carmen, ever the diplomatic one, nodded. "We're sorry, we'll calm down." Then, turning to Peter, she added quietly, "This isn't over. We'll talk to our mother and settle this once and for all." Peter nodded, knowing that the conflict was far from resolved. With one last glance at the closed door to Sophia's room, he walked away down the hallway, the weight of the envelope and the responsibility Sophia had entrusted to him weighing on his shoulders. Inside the room, Sophia listened to the echo of voices in the hallway, her heart torn between love for her children and the conviction that she was doing the right thing. She knew that the revelations she had just made to Peter would change everything, and she could only hope that, in the end, her family would understand her reasons. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and confrontations. Carmen and Michael, determined to understand their mother's actions, pressed her with questions and pleas. Sophia, exhausted but firm, stuck to her decision. "My children," she told them during one of her visits, "I know this is difficult to understand, but Peter needs this opportunity more than we do. He has a good heart and will make good use of the apartment." Michael, frustrated, replied, "But Mom, what about us? What about our children? That floor is part of our family legacy." Sophia took her son's hands between hers. "Michael, honey, the real legacy is not in the walls or the furniture. It's in the values I've taught you, in the love we share. And part of that legacy is helping those in need." Carmen, though equally confused by her mother's decision, was beginning to see a glimmer of the wisdom behind her actions. "Mom," she said softly, "are you sure Peter is the right person for this? We hardly know him." Sophia smiled, a smile full of secrets and certainties. "I know him better than you think. I trust him, and I ask you to trust my judgment." Meanwhile, Peter struggled with his own moral crisis. The weight of Sophia's trust and the responsibility of money overwhelmed him. He spent sleepless nights thinking about how he could honor Sophia's wishes without destroying his family in the process. It was during one of these sleepless nights that Peter made a decision. He could not sit idly by while Sophia's family fell apart. He needed to do something, to find a way to bridge the gap between Sophia's desire and his children's concerns. With determination, Peter began to do research. He searched for information on social housing programs, foundations that helped the homeless, and organizations that worked to create opportunities for the less fortunate. Slowly, an idea began to take shape in his mind. One morning, with the plan already formed, Peter headed to the residence. He needed to talk to Sophia one more time before putting his idea into action. However, when he arrived, he was met with an unexpected scene. Carmen and Michael were in Sophia's room, and from their expressions, it was obvious that something serious had happened. Sophia lay on her bed, pale and weak, but with a look of determination in her eyes. "Peter," Sophia said as soon as she saw him, her voice barely a whisper, "how good of you to come. It's time for everyone to know the truth." Peter felt the world stop around him. Was Sophia about to reveal everything? Was he ready to face the consequences of that revelation? With his heart pounding, Peter entered the room, closing the door behind him. What was about to happen would change their lives forever, and he could only hope that somehow they could find a path to understanding and reconciliation. Sophia's room at the Jardines del Retiro residence, normally a haven of peace, had become the scene of a tense family reunion. Carmen and Michael, their expressions ranging from concern to confusion, sat on one side of their mother's bed. Peter, uncomfortable but determined, remained standing near the door, as if ready to flee at any moment. Sophia, despite her obvious physical weakness, exuded an inner strength that kept everyone silent, expectant. With a deep sigh, she began to speak. "My dear children, Peter," she said, her voice weak but clear, "the time has come for you to know the whole truth. I have kept secrets for too long, and now I see that the weight of those secrets is causing pain to the people I love most." Carmen took her mother's hand, her eyes filled with held-back tears. "Mom, what are you talking about? What secrets?" Sophia looked at Peter, as if seeking strength before continuing. "The apartment on Fuencarral Street, the money in the safe. There's a lot more at stake than you know." Michael leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What do you mean, Mom?" "Many years ago," Sophia began, "when your father and I were young, we went through some very difficult times. We came close to losing everything. That's when we met an extraordinary woman, Doña Eliza. She offered us a home when we needed it most, and taught us a lesson that changed our lives forever." Peter listened intently, recognizing parts of the story Sophia had told him earlier. "Doña Eliza told us that true wealth was not in what we owned, but in what we could do for others. She made us promise that if we ever had the chance, we would do the same for someone else." Carmen and Michael exchanged glances, beginning to understand where their mother's story was headed. "Over time," Sophia continued, "your father and I worked hard. We bought the apartment, saved every penny we could, but we never forgot our promise. We always knew that someday, that money and that apartment would be used for something bigger than ourselves." "But Mom," Michael interrupted, his voice strained, "why didn't you ever tell us this?" Sophia smiled sadly. "Because we wanted to protect you. We didn't want them to feel the burden of that promise. We wanted them to live their lives, to raise their own families without worrying about anything else." "And then you met Peter," Carmen said, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together in her mind. Sophia nodded. "When I met Peter, I knew he was the right person. Someone who would understand the true value of what we were offering, someone who would continue our mission to help others." Peter, moved by Sophia's words, stepped forward. I didn't know the whole story," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Sophia, I promise I will honor your trust. I will use the apartment and the money to help others, to create opportunities for those in need." Michael stood abruptly, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. This is too much to process. Are you saying that all this time the apartment and your life savings were meant to be donated?" Sophia nodded slowly. "Yes, Michael. That was always the plan. Your father and I wanted to leave a legacy of generosity, not just material possessions." Carmen, always the more reflective of the two siblings, was silent for a moment before speaking. "Mom, I understand your intentions, but why Peter? Why didn't you entrust us with this mission?" Sophia looked at her daughter with love and a touch of sadness. "Because you, my dear children, already have your own lives, your own responsibilities. Peter understands what it's like to have nothing and receive a second chance. I know he will do the right thing with this gift." Silence fell over the room as everyone processed Sophia's revelations. Peter, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, decided to share his own plans. I've been thinking about this a lot," he said, drawing everyone's attention. "I've done some research on social housing programs and organizations that help homeless people. I think we could use the apartment as a starting point for a larger project, a place where people can receive not only a roof over their heads, but also training and support to rebuild their lives." Carmen and Michael looked at Peter with a mixture of surprise and, for the first time, a hint of respect. Sophia smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "You see, my children, this is why I trust Peter. He understands the true spirit of what your father and I wanted to accomplish." Michael, still struggling with his emotions, ran a hand over his face. This is a lot to take in. I need time to process it all." Carmen, for her part, seemed to be coming to a kind of acceptance. "Mom, Peter," she said slowly, "I think I understand what they're trying to do. And while it hurts me to think about losing the family apartment, I can also see the beauty in this plan." Sophia reached out, taking Carmen and Michael's hands. "My dear children, you are not losing anything. You are gaining the opportunity to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Our family's true legacy is not in the walls of that floor, but in the hearts of the people we can help. Peter, sensing it was time to bridge the gap, stepped forward. "Carmen, Michael," he said sincerely, "I understand that this is difficult for you, but I promise you that I will do everything I can to honor the memory of your parents and the spirit of their generosity. And I would like you to be a part of this if you are willing." Michael, still reluctant but beginning to relent, looked at Peter with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "What exactly do you have in mind?" And so, in that small room in the Jardines del Retiro residence, a plan began to take shape that would change not only the lives of Sofia, Peter, Carmen, and Michael, but potentially those of many other people in need in Madrid. As Sofia watched her children and Peter discuss ideas and possibilities, she felt a deep inner peace. She knew that whatever happened, she had done the right thing by trusting Peter and revealing the truth to her children. The legacy of love and generosity that she and Anthony had dreamed of was about to become a reality, in a way that neither of them could have imagined. The conversation went on for hours, with moments of tension, of emotion, and finally, of mutual understanding. As night fell over Madrid, something had changed in that room. A new story was about to begin, a story of redemption, of second chances, and of a legacy that went far beyond the walls of an apartment on Fuencarral Street. The months following Sofia's revelation were a whirlwind of activity and emotions. Peter, Carmen, and Michael, united by a common purpose despite their initial differences, embarked on the task of making Sofia and Anthony's dream come true. The apartment on Fuencarral Street became the center of operations of their new project. With the help of lawyers and financial advisors, they established a foundation in honor of Sofia and Anthony Mendoza. The goal: to provide temporary housing and support to homeless people, helping them reintegrate into society. Peter, with his first-hand experience of life on the streets, became the heart of the project. His understanding of the needs and challenges of the homeless was invaluable in designing effective programs. Carmen, using her organizational skills and network of contacts in the business world, took charge of management and fundraising. Surprisingly, she found that many companies were willing to collaborate once they knew the story behind the project. Michael, initially the most reluctant, found his place in the foundation, working on the legal and administrative side. His experience as a lawyer proved crucial in navigating the complex legal and bureaucratic requirements of establishing and operating a non-profit organization. The Fuencarral Street apartment was completely transformed. The first floor became a drop-in and counseling center, where the homeless could receive immediate help, from a hot meal to legal advice. The upper floors were set up as temporary housing, providing a safe haven for those in the process of rebuilding their lives. Sofia, although her health remained delicate, found new energy in seeing her dream come to life. From her room in the residence, she received regular updates on the progress of the project. Each success story, each life transformed, filled her heart with joy and confirmed that she had made the right decision. One day, almost a year after the big revelation, Peter arrived at the residence with exciting news. "Sofia," he said, his eyes shining with excitement, "we have to take you to see something." With the doctor's permission and the help of Carmen and Michael, Sofia was wheeled to Fuencarral Street. When they arrived in front of the building, Sofia could not hold back her tears. The facade of the building had been completely renovated. Above the front door, a sign read, "Fundación Mendoza, un hogar, una oportunidad." Mendoza Foundation, one home, one opportunity. In the windows, colorful posters advertised the different programs and services offered. "Oh my God," Sofia whispered, overcome with emotion. Peter knelt down next to her wheelchair. "This is just the beginning, Sofia. In the last year, we have helped over 50 people find jobs and permanent housing. We have a vocational training program, psychological counseling, and even a small free clinic downstairs," Carmen added, with pride in her voice. "And all this thanks to you and Dad, Mom, your vision, your generosity. It's changing lives." Michael, who had been unusually quiet, approached his mother. "Mom, I want to apologize," he said in a broken voice. "At first I didn't understand. I was so focused on the material. But now I see the real legacy you and Dad wanted to leave. It's beautiful." Sofia took her son's hand, her eyes full of love and understanding. "There's nothing to forgive, honey. The important thing is that we're all in this together now." At that moment, the door of the foundation opened and a group of people came out. They were some of the beneficiaries of the program, along with volunteers and staff. Upon seeing Sophia, they began to applaud and shout words of thanks. "Thank you, Doña Sofia. God bless you. You changed my life." Sophia, overwhelmed with emotion, could not hold back her tears. Peter, Carmen and Michael surrounded her, forming a protective circle of love and support. At that moment, Sophia knew she had fulfilled the promise she had made so many years before. The legacy of generosity and love that she and Anthony had dreamed of had not only come true, but had exceeded all her expectations. As the sun began to set over Madrid, bathing Fuencarral Street in a warm golden glow, Sophia looked around her, at her children, at Peter, at the people whose lives had been transformed. In her eyes shone a peace and joy beyond words. "Anthony," she whispered to herself, "we made it, my love. We made it." And so, on that street that had witnessed so many stories, a new chapter began. A chapter of hope, of second chances, of lives transformed. The small apartment that had once been just a family home had become a beacon of hope for an entire community. Peter, looking at Sophia with deep respect and affection, knew that his life would never be the same again. The trust this extraordinary woman had placed in him had not only given him a home and a purpose, but had taught him the true meaning of generosity and unconditional love. Carmen and Michael, for their part, discovered a new dimension in their relationship as siblings and with their mother. The project had brought them together in a way they could never have imagined, forging bonds stronger than any material inheritance. As night fell over Madrid, the Mendoza Foundation shone like a beacon of hope on Fuencarral Street. It was a living testimony that an act of kindness, born of love and gratitude, could grow and multiply, touching countless lives along the way. Sophia, surrounded by the love of her family and the gratitude of those she had helped, closed her eyes with a smile of peace. She knew that whatever happened, her legacy would live on far beyond her time in this world. And in that knowledge, he found the sweetest of satisfactions.